Good morning, all of you. Today we will start with a new chapter in history, Struggle for Indian Freedom. Struggle for Indian Freedom, page number 126. Turn your books to 126. Now, if you remember the last history chapter that we did, okay, what was the name of the last history chapter that we did? Yes, what was the name of the last history chapter that we did? Come on, class.
Ma'am, rise for Indian nationalism.
Okay, rise of Indian nationalism. So, if you remember, we studied that how this feeling of nationalism, this feeling of love, patriotism, and loyalty towards the country, it grew into the hearts and minds of people. So, we saw that also, and we also saw the setting up of early political organizations. Under that, we saw the setting up of Indian National Congress. Okay, which year was the Indian National Congress established? Yes, Indian National Congress. Which year?
1885.
Okay, 1885.
1880.
When one very important person is associated with it, with the establishment of Indian National Congress. What is his name?
Alan Octavian Hume.
Right, Alan Octavian Hume. And we also saw during the course of that chapter that during the first 20 years of during the first 20 years of Congress, it was led by group of people which were known as moderates. Okay, and so we saw that the moderates, why they were called moderates, because of their objectives and how they wanted to achieve those objectives. So because of them, they were called moderates. But we saw that the moderates, they were not able to achieve much, and so a new group of leadership arose which were called as the
Extremist.
extremists. Okay, who were the three main people associated with the extremists?
Ma'am, Lala Lajpat Rai, Bal Gangadhar Tilak,
And
Bipin Chandra Pal.
right. So, and famously, these three are known as
Lal Bal Pal.
Lal Bal Pal. All right. So we saw that because there was such a huge difference between the objectives of the moderates and the extremists and their ways to achieve those objectives. So obviously there were conflicts between the moderates and the extremists, and the conflict grew so much that the Congress split. In which year did the Congress split?
Ma'am, in 1906.
1906. Are you sure? Yes. Check.
Ma'am, 1907.
1907, 1907. At which session of the Congress? Which place?
Ma'am, Surat.
Surat session, right. And after a few years, the Congress, it united again. Which year did it unite?
1916.
1916. Which place? Which place did the moderates and the extremists unite again? Which session of the Congress? Lucknow session. All right, this you remember, Lucknow session of the Congress. Now 1916, there was another very important incident taking place. 1916, the moderates and the extremists, they came together, and two more organizations came together. Which were those two organizations?
World War I.
Yes.
Home tour movement.
Home rule movement. Yes, home rule movement. This that also took place in 1916. All right, and
World War One.
no, no, not World War One. No, World War One started in which year? Yes,
1914. Ma'am, 1914.
1914. Right. So 1916, we had the Congress. uniting again at the Lucknow session of the Congress. Home rule movement. Which person is associated with the home rule movement? I told you not to forget that name. Whenever
Annie Besant.
Annie Besant, right. And in 1916, another important event took place, that was the coming together of the Congress and the Muslim League, which was called as the Lucknow Pact. All right. So the moderates and the extremists, they also united, whereas the Muslim League and the Congress, they also came together and in the Lucknow Pact, and they said that now they will be together in this freedom struggle. All right. Okay. So now we will continue to this new chapter, Struggle for Indian Freedom, from the year 1919 to 1947. Now, after the First World War, that is 1914 to 1918, the national movement in India, it became more vigorous, means more vigorous, it became more strong and active and full of energy. Why? Because of the hollowness of the British promises which they made during the war. Now they asked the Indians to help them in the war, and they said, they promised that if they'll win the war, then obviously they will grant India a dominion status, and give them more concessions and all that. But they did not do anything of the sort, and so the Indians realized that they will not fulfill their promises, they will do nothing for us. And so that is why this national movement, it became more strong and more full of energy. And now and the whole scene, it also changed with the coming up of the one important personality on the scene of Indian freedom movement, and that was of Mahatma Gandhi. And now under the guidance of Mahatma Gandhi, the the history of Indian freedom struggle, it reached unparalleled height. Means the one unparalleled means which has not been achieved earlier. So that phase which has not been achieved earlier in the history of India, with the coming of Mahatma Gandhi on the scene of our independence struggle, the Indians, they achieved that phase. And many times it is also referred to as the Gandhian phase of Indian history, the Gandhian phase of Indian history. Now, one of the greatest men, they are saying, to have in the history of India now is unarguably Mahatma Gandhi. Means there is no argument in that. He has been one of the greatest men that India has ever seen. And now they say that the way he shaped the national movement, now that is worthy of a standing ovation. When somebody performs very nicely, so everyone, they stand up and they applaud. And so the work that he did, and the way he shaped the national movement, and how he led to our independence, now that is worthy of a standing ovation. Now he was so much into it that he even sacrificed his life for the sake of the country. And it is said that Mahatma Gandhi, he played a pivotal role. Pivotal means a very critical, very important role, central role in the freedom of India. And his ways, Satya and Ahimsa, means truth and non-violence. And his peaceful methods, they were the foundation for gaining independence for India. And his methods were such that the British, they had no reply to it. They cannot, to his, how would you retaliate to Satya and Ahimsa? How would you retaliate? How would you fight back to truth and non-violence? And that is how we got our independence. Now something about Mahatma Gandhi. Mahatma Gandhi, he was born as Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi on which date? When was Mahatma Gandhi born?
Ma'am, 2nd October.
2nd October, which place?
Porbandar.
In, where is Porbandar?
Ma'am, Gujarat.
Gujarat. All right. And thereafter he went off to South Africa. So after his marriage, he went off to South Africa to work as a barrister. So he worked there as a barrister for 20 years. Now barrister is also a type of a lawyer, and he went and worked there for 20 years. And now in South Africa, he had his first contact or brush with apartheid. Now, what was this apartheid? Now, this was a system of racial discrimination, and segregation, which was very special or peculiar to South Africa. Now, what happened in South Africa also, just like in India, the Europeans, they went, and South Africa was also their colony, and there they followed this racial policy. Now, what was different, like in India, the Europeans, they came, but they did not settle down in such large numbers as compared to South Africa. There, what happened, the Europeans, they came and they settled down also in South Africa in large numbers, and then they followed this policy of racial discrimination, means they ill treated, did not treat the people equally and properly, and ill treated them. And of segregation means when you separate, means things were separate, colonies were separate for the blacks and whites, their working places were separate, means even if the blacks, they had to cross the residential areas of the whites. For that, they had to have a permit. If they needed to go to a market where the whites work for, and if they wanted to, obviously they were not allowed to work there. And if they had to go to an area where the whites worked or the whites lived, then they needed to have a permit, and they were not allowed to work with them or to live with them. And even schools and colleges and everything, it was separate for the, even the trains and buses, they were all separate for the blacks and whites there. And so, and this system of discrimination, it was, obviously it was for the blacks, but also for the coloreds. Now many other nationalities come under the coloreds, like Indian also, we also fall under that category. So this system of discrimination, it was not only against the blacks but also against the coloreds, means the Indians. And Mahatma Gandhi, at that time, he was in South Africa. And once, what happened, while he was traveling in the first class compartment of a railway carriage, and he has a valid first class ticket, but the ticket collector, he came to him and said to vacate his seat and move to the second class compartment. Mahatma Gandhi, he was obviously not willing to do so. He said, I have a valid first class railway ticket, why should I move to the second class? And he did not leave his place. And so on the next station, what happened, he was thrown out of the railway carriage, or he was thrown out of the train. And when he fell down there on the platform, there he decided that he will really do something to wipe this apartheid from the world. Okay. And then later on, he came back to in India in 1915, and he found out that his own people, they were also suffering, and they were also being discriminated here in their own country. And so the Britishers, they were treating the Indians also harshly, and in a discriminated manner. And like other men in history, so Gandhiji, he also took his time. It was not just he came in 1915 and all of a sudden he became Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi, he became Mahatma Gandhi. No, it was not like that. So he took his time to develop his personality and his ways, so as to get maximum impact. And for that, first he had a tour of the entire country. So he went to different places to find out the problems of the people, what they were facing, and how to bring all the people together, so that together they can really make a big impact. So he did all that, and few things in him now that were really very important. First, his faith in different religions, the faith that he had in all the other religions, now that is commendable, means it is praiseworthy. And he listened to the teachings of Christianity with same faith and belief as he would read the Hindu scriptures. Then, very special thing about him, that he was brutally honest, means he was so honest that sometimes it could even hurt the other person, that he was so honest. So he was so honest and truthful, and this helped him throughout his life. And now, under the leadership and guidance of Mahatma Gandhi, the Congress, they led many freedom struggles, many movements, many independence movements, major movements, freedom, which were led by him, and they are discussed here below. So first, what we'll do, we will discuss them in brief, in short, and later on during the course of the chapter, obviously, we will study them in detail. Okay, now one of the first series of this non-violent protest nationwide was the non-cooperation movement. Now before we go on to non-cooperation movement, I want to tell you something about I talked about truth and ahimsa. Now his thinking was set that if what we stand for is truth, all right, and if you are standing for truth, then there is no need to use violent methods to achieve your goal or objective. So he said that if you are true, if what you are standing for is truth, then there is no need for violence. We can achieve what we want to achieve through non-violence also. And his and along with truth ahimsa, there was also passive resistance, means you don't openly go and retaliate and fight back with your oppressor or with your enemy. Here in this case, the Indians were being oppressed, and who was the oppressor, who was oppressing them? The Britishers. So he said that what we have to do, we have to deal with the conscience of the oppressor. And he believed that all the people, they have something good inherent in them. And sometimes it may be that the bad is so much that it overpowers the good, but still there is something good in all of us, and we have to uh, uh, direct our intentions, our measures towards that good which is inherent in the people, whether it is the oppressor also. And we just simply had to make him see what the truth is, and then obviously we will get what we want. So that is what his concept was. And now one of the first major mass movements was the non-cooperation movement. Now why non-cooperation movement? Now Gandhiji, he was of the view that the Britishers, they were able to establish their rule over India. Why? Because we the Indians, we cooperated with them, and that is why they were able to rule over us. And so he was of the view that if we stopped cooperating with them, then what will happen? The British rule in India, it will come to an end. So with that view in mind, he started this non-cooperation movement. And this movement, it officially started the Gandhian era in India. And now this non-cooperation movement, it was basically aimed at making the Indians aware of the fact that the British government, they can be opposed also. Till this time, the Indians, they were of the view that no, they are so strong and so powerful, we cannot oppose them. But this led them to believe that no, they can oppose the British government, and if it was done in a proper manner, then obviously we can also keep a check on them. And so under this non-cooperation movement, now this non-cooperation movement, it was set up to be unfold in stages. So there were three stages to this non-cooperation movement. And now all that we'll do when we will study this in detail. But like I told you, that Gandhiji, he stood for non-violence. And this particular movement, it was called off abruptly all of a sudden because of a violent incident at Chori Chora. So we'll study about that. And so what now I want to tell you is basically that this movement, it was not successful. So though this movement was a failure, but still the Indians, they were awakened to the concept of going against the British. They realized that yes, they can even stand up against the British, and they can oppose the British. Okay. The next is the civil disobedience movement. Like I told you, now we are simply doing it in brief, in very short. Later on, we will discuss them in detail. And like I told you that the non-cooperation movement, it was to be unfold in stages. And the third stage of that was civil disobedience movement. Means if by the first and the second stage, the Britishers, they would not listen, then they will land a full-fledged civil disobedience movement. Now, how were these two movements different? Now, like I told you, non-cooperation means you stop cooperating with the British in any way. Now, this was a step ahead of non-cooperation. You not only stop cooperating with them, but also breaking the laws in a peaceful manner. So deliberate defying of laws, deliberate breaking of laws. Now when we are saying that you defy the laws or you break the laws, it does not mean that you go on breaking any law. It does not mean you go on stealing and robbing people and killing people. No, no, here we are talking about defying and breaking those laws which were discriminatory towards the Indians, all right, which treated the Indians differently from the British, which did not treat them equally. So defying those laws, breaking those laws. And now this movement, it basically aimed at bringing the British administration to a stop by withdrawing support. Now, so here what happened, in under the civil disobedience movement, the people, they stopped paying taxes. And so basically it was a way of saying, when we give taxes to the government, all of us do so now also. And we have so many taxes, we have income tax and so many other taxes levied on everything, put on everything, and we pay what we when we pay those taxes. We are saying that, okay, yes, we acknowledge you, that you govern over us, and we are giving it as that. Now when the Indians during that time, they stopped paying taxes, they simply wanted to say that you have no authority to rule over us. That is basically what they wanted to say. And at that time, the Britishers, they put tax on each and everything possible, whatever their mind comes to, they put a tax on that also, like from the thing of necessity, like salt also. And till everything, even there was a grazing tax at that time. Now who are pastoralists? Have you ever heard about the pastoralists? Anyone? Yes, no? So these pastoralists, they are also, you can say, nomads. They move from one place to another, just like them, but they move from one place to another along with their herds of cattle, sheep, goats, buffaloes, donkeys, from one place to another. Now they moved according to the season, all right, like winter, summer, rainy, dry season, and they move according to that. Now what happened under the Brit and before the Britishers came to India, means pre-colonial period, what happened, these herders, they were able to move along with their herds and cattle anywhere they wanted. There was no tax on them. But under the colonial period, when the Britishers were ruling here, they put a grazing tax also. Now under that, what happened, that for every head of cattle that they grazed, means for every single cattle that they had, they were all counted, and according to that, they had to pay taxes also. So whenever they entered a pasture ground, means where those huge open areas with grass, small grass is there, where these cattle, they can eat the forage there. And so before they had to enter these pasture grounds, now they had to pay the tax, and then only they were allowed. So what I mean to say is that they put a tax on each and everything, and obviously it was discriminatory to the people here. And even the tax with the peasants, the farmers, they had to pay. Now that was also increased. And even if there was a bad harvest, or rains, and no rains, dry, means famine was there, drought was there, even then they were forced to pay the taxes. And so the people, basically what happened, they were unhappy with the way the Britishers were ruling. And so, like under the civil disobedience movement, what we can say is, it was not only not cooperating with them, but also defying the laws which were discriminatory towards the people. And the civil disobedience started with a very famous march, which we call as the Dandi March. Now this Dandi March, does anyone know anything about Dandi March? Anyone here? Tell me whatever you know about Dandi March. I think you all must have heard about it. Yes? Yes, class 8th. No response. Let me see who all. Yes, beta. Okay, have you heard about Dandi March or not? At least tell me that yes, ma'am, no, ma'am. Have you heard about
Yes,
it or
ma'am.
not? Heard about it? Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, what happened in that? What happened at the end of Dandi March? What did Gandhi ji do? Or what law did he break? Any idea?
Ma'am, salt law.
Salt
Ma'am,
law.
salt making law.
All right. So what was the salt law? It said that the British, they had monopoly over the making and selling of salt, and no one else can do it. Now for the people who live near the coastal areas, now that is a very easy way of their livelihood. And but the Indians, they were stopped from making salt as well as on selling salt, and on top of that there was a tax also on salt, which was a thing of necessity. And so Gandhiji, he began the civil disobedience movement by breaking this salt law. So with the end of this Dandi March, when he completed his march, there he boiled sea water to make salt, and he broke the salt law. Okay, so for today, we will stop here. Have you all understood what we did today? Is it clear to all of you?
Yes, ma'am. Yes,
All
ma'am.
right.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.